So today we are going to continue with a further aphorisms. We have done till 205. So today we will start with 206. So I hope that till this part, like we have done 205, 205 aphorisms of the Organon. So I hope that the things are clear till now, because every time I tell uh, everyone that just go through the old aphorisms once we start with the new, that whatever we have done like in the last week, it is better that we go through that, we revise that thing again and then continue with the next part so that a link can be made. Because these aphorisms, they are like, you know, stairs. We are going up, we are ascending up. So the connection with each of them is very important. So in our mind also, that connection should be there, that this aphorism basically says this and the next aphorism is about this thing. So I hope that because last time we started with the miasm thing, there was a little introduction of the miasms, that although in Organon Dr. Hahnemann has not given a detailed view on the miasm part, but in his book of the chronic diseases, he has given a detailed view of the miasm, that what it is, how it is seen, what are the symptoms, what we have to bear in our mind when we are, although that part will come in this part also, in the organ part, that when we are taking the case, how we have to keep that miasmatic part in the mind, what we have to ask, what we have to see. So now these aphorisms, they are regarding the miasm, what should be done in which miasm when you see that thing in the patient in front of you. Then next we will start with the mental diseases. There will be a general introduction on what is disposition, why it is important, and then we will start with what are the mental diseases and how they should be cured basically. So aphorism 206, before commencing the treatment of a chronic disease. So before we start with any kind of treatment of a chronic disease, any kind of chronic disease which the patient is suffering from, when we start the treatment, it is necessary to make the most careful investigation as to whether the patient has had a venereal infection or an infection with the condylomatous gonorrhea. So he's saying that before commencing or before starting the treatment of any kind of disease, any kind of chronic disease, it is very important that we should ask the patient whether he had suffered from any kind of syphilis or gonorrhea. Whether he has taken any kind of treatment, whether he is currently suffering from it, because it is very important to know. For then the treatment must be directed towards this alone, and if he has suffered from that thing or he is currently suffering from that thing, then this part should be first treated with the anti-syphilitic or antipsychotic medications. For then the treatment must be directed towards this alone. So first we have to treat this part alone, because this is a secondary miasm. Because in such cases, like I'll tell you an example of such a case. We had this lady who was suffering from this destruction of the whole eyeball, the right eye. It was completely, when she came to us, she had this eye operated out, because this eyeball, it completely got necrosed without any reason, without anything. It started becoming inflamed. Then there was this pus discharge which started oozing out, and when she was checked, that the doctor told that it is completely destroyed and necrosed, and we have to take it out, otherwise the whole necrosis will go into the skull or the brain. So this right eyeball, it was completely removed, and when she came to us, the left eyeball started getting involved with the same kind of affection. So then she came to us. So when we took the case, we were seeing, and when you have been seeing the cases from so long, something strikes you that how come so suddenly this, so much destructive process has happened with this person without any prior disease. There was nothing prior to it, and suddenly she started getting this thing. So when there's difficulty in making that connection, that you are not able to understand that from where it has come suddenly. And that is the time, although we should do it in each and every case, but the I will just tell you where we usually ask about these things, but the patients, they sometimes conceal it, they don't give the information about it. So even in those cases, we should have this thing in the mind by looking at the disease, by looking at certain symptoms that he might have suffered from that syphilis or gonorrhea, he or she. So we asked her that whether you have taken any kind of such treatment or you have suffered from this kind of problem. So she said, no, no, I have never. So, and then we asked about the husband, that whether the husband has, like, according to your knowledge, has your husband suffered from this kind of problem, or he has? And she said, no, no, not that I have heard of, or if you want, I'll ask him, but I don't think he has. And he told that he has not when she asked him next time. But still in the mind, it was known that somewhere, this picture is of the secondary symptoms of syphilis. That's, it does not fit into that, how the psoric miasm progresses, it does not fit into that. So we gave the medicine. I wrote it down in a query that maybe, we will need some antisyphilitic treatment along with it. So by the chance, how the journey of some patient has to go, next time the husband also came for taking the medications. He wanted to go abroad and he wanted to submit for his medical records. He had some issues with his liver and SGOT, SGPT. So we gave the medicine, and next, after 15 days, he had to conduct these tests which are necessary for going abroad to settle. So in those tests, he came out to be, the syphilis came out to be positive. So then I asked him about, then he, yes, I had some kind of this thing in the past, some kind of relation, and I got infected and I was treated for it. So that became confirmed, but still before that we had already started with that lady, this anti-syphilitic, like we started with the Merxol for her. We will go into those details later on in some other time. But it is very important to know in such chronic cases that whether there has been these kind of affections or this to the patient, so that we can basically take care of that also. Because the first thing is that before starting any antipsoric treatment, we have to start with the antisyphilitic or antipsychotic treatments if they are present. So when they are present, the treatment must be directed towards this alone when only the signs of syphilis or of a rare condylomatous disease are present. But this disease is very seldom met with alone nowadays. So nowadays, we don't get such, even with the patients coming to us, very rarely you will get an acute or recent case of syphilis or gonorrhea, because most of them have been maltreated. Some medicines have been taken. The patients, they don't disclose it very easily, but still we have to do our duty according to what is told to us. If such infection has previously occurred, this must also be borne in mind in the treatment of those cases in which SORA is present. So because when the SORA and psychosis and syphilis, they mix up, they become a very complicated picture. Because in them, the later is complicated with the former, as is always the case when the symptoms are not those of pure syphilis. So when the symptoms are not of pure syphilis, then the SORA, most of the time the soric affection is already going on in between the syphilis or the psychosis. The gonorrhea, it peaks up and they become intermingled. For when the physician thinks he has a case of old venereal disease before him, he has always or almost always to treat a syphilitic affection accompanied mostly by complicated with SORA, For the internal itch dyscrasia, the psora is far the most frequent, most certain fundamental cause of chronic diseases, either united, complicated with syphilis or with psychosis, if the later infections have avidly occurred. So in such cases where patient has been affected or infected by the venereal diseases, because without the permission of psora, even the psychosis and syphilis, they cannot come in. Mostly psychosis and syphilis, they come when the psora is in a latent stage. So, but when we have to cure it, when we have to treat it, when we have to give up medicine to the patient and they are suffering from this kind of the thing, so we have to remove that kind of symptoms. We have to remove those symptoms of the venereal miasms first and then give an anti-psoric or a constitutional remedy to the patient. This does not happen in every case. Okay, there are cases which are of pure psoric origin. Most of the cases are of pure. Only in certain cases you require this kind of treatment or this kind of thing which is given in the book Chronic Miasm. There are many kind of variable treatments given when a patient is suffering from psychosis or syphilis, depending upon whether it is of recent occurrence or of some old occurrence or it has been suppressed. So depending upon the medicines are given for removal of it, but it is very, I will not say rarely, but very less frequently encountered thing. Or as is much more frequently the case, psora is the sole fundamental cause of all other chronic maladies. Okay? So basically, psora is the sole fundamental cause of all the chronic maladies, whatever names they may bear, which are moreover so often bungled, increased and disfigured to a monstrous extent by allopathic unskillfulness. Okay? So all the chronic maladies which come naturally, psora is the fundamental cause for that. And when they're bungled up with some kind of medications, because in chronic disease what happens is that when for example, someone is having some kind of neuralgic pains from a long time, some kind of GIT trouble, some dyspepsia, and they have been taking some medications, some allopathic medications or some other medications which have been aimed at the uh, disease, not on the whole, not on the sick patient. So some symptoms they get bungled up. Bungled up means that the original picture is lost. Some symptoms of the medicinal disease, they start coming up, they start forming up, which we call as the side effects. Okay, but that is a medicinal disease, because once you start telling people that it is a medicinal disease, the people will become afraid of medicine. So we call them as the side effects, that medicine is affecting in a positive way, but some side effects are there. But no, it is not side effect. It is basically the medicinal disease. It is a medicinal dyscrasia. So footnote to Aphorism 206. In investigations of this nature, we must not allow ourselves to be deceived by the assertions of the patients or their friends, who frequently assign as the cause of chronic, even of the severest and most inveterate diseases, either a cold caught, a thorough wetting, drinking cold water after being heated many years ago. So in this aphorism, basically Dr. Hahnemann wants the physician, wants the homeopathic doctor to know this thing, that the chronic disease, when you are dealing with the chronic diseases, there is something which has caused that disease and which is basically um, keeping it up, keeping the symptoms up. For example, if you get affected by cold air, okay, you will sneeze, some mucus will come, but after a few minutes or an hour, it will settle down, or a day, it will settle down on its own, because now you are not getting continuously exposed to the cold air. So there is no need for the body to react to it, because there is no stimulus. But in chronic diseases, when we see at the chronic, for example, diabetes is there, for example, hypertension is there are some chronic pains, there are some chronic weaknesses which are happening, some chronic headaches. So what are the things which are making, basically stimulating that thing all the time and keeping it up in the patient? So there has to be some constant cause, some fundamental cause to it, which is making those symptoms and keeping it up. They are developed and they remain there, or they develop into something next. So because of this thing, Dr. Hahnemann wants it to be very clear for the physician that some old cold or some cold which patient once caught by getting wet or by drinking some cold water or by being heated, it cannot be the cause of a chronic disease which has happened years ago. Many times patients will come that, okay, once 5 years ago, 6 years ago, he had he went to the mountains, he got exposed to the cold, and he started having this breathing difficulty. And from that time, he has developed this asthma or some chronic bronchitis. That cannot happen. At once some cold and it even after 5 years, 6 years, that is still acting upon the person. No, it cannot. Those things can basically stimulate the patient from the latent sora stage, but they cannot keep acting, or they are not the producers of the disease. Or a former fright, a sprain, a vexation, sometimes even a bewitchment, etc. Or some kind of vexation many years ago, or some sprain and some fright, or some kind of, if patient thinks that some black magic was done on him, those things, they cannot keep up a chronic disease. These causes are much too insignificant to develop a chronic disease in a healthy body, to keep it up for years and to aggravate year by year, and every year the problem is aggravating. Like we have also talked about it many times before also, that once a chronic disease starts, it keeps on increasing. It keeps on increasing until a right remedy is not given. It will keep on increasing. So year by year it is increasing, it is getting aggravated, it is there all the time. So those small things, those small affections which once happened, they cannot keep it up and keep it increasing every year. There has to be something more deeper than that, as is the case with all chronic diseases from developed sura. So Dr. Hahnemann, he gave this miasm the name of sura. This is the miasm from where everything is developing. Causes of a much more important character than these remembered noxious influences must lie at the root of the initiation and progress of a serious obstinate disease of long standing, because they are very obstinate diseases. Chronic diseases are very obstinate. The progress is a serious progress. They are progressing continuously from long time. So these assigned causes, or these causes which the patient is telling about or the attendants are telling about, they don't make a sense for that thing. So the assigned causes could not only rouse into activity the latent chronic miasm. Like I told you, that if they can only just bring out the latent chronic miasm, but it was always there. It was ready to erupt. One small stimulus and it will erupt out. But that is not the cause. So we have to understand this thing. So when the above information has been gained, it still remains for the homeopathic physician to ascertain what kinds of allopathic treatment had up to that date been adopted for the chronic diseases, what perturbing medicines had been chiefly and most frequently employed, also what mineral baths had been used and what effects these had produced, in order to understand in some measure the degeneration of the disease from its original state. So once we have taken this information, now we are gathering the information, from where all these symptoms are coming in a chronic disease, whether they are from the psychotic miasm or the syphilitic miasm, or they purely belong to the soric miasm, or they basically belong to the medicinal disease, which have been caused by the various treatments, various kind of the things which have been applied or employed by the patient. Okay? So we have to understand whether what kind of effects these medicines, the allopathic treatment, from how long the patient has been taking, what new symptoms came up after this medication. Patients usually know about this, that these symptoms basically started when I started taking that medication. So they usually know until the symptoms are very subtle or they have not been come to the conscious part of the patient. Usually the patients, they know that these things happened after I started taking this or that medicine. So in order to understand in some way the degeneration of the disease from its original state, and we also have to understand that how much the disease is more degenerated or more complicated from its original state. Okay, and where possible, to correct in part these pernicious artificial operations, and how we can make some changes to his medication or how he takes or what he takes, whether like many a times, this pentoperazole, it is always given, some antacid is always given with the medications, or some kind of uh, whenever a patient has blood pressure, some kind of statins they are always prescribed. So we have to understand whether these medications, if even the patient has been taking from a long time, which of the medicines we should tell them not to use right now, or to enable him to avoid the employment of medicines. Okay, which medicines can be, removed from the is this medicinal diet. We call it medicinal diet because you know we, some people they take medicines as if they are taking food. I was like recently a patient came, she was taking 18 different kind of medicines in a day, 18 medicines. So whatever was necessary, at that particular, because many times the patients when they are taking medications from very 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 long time, the body has become dependent upon them. So suddenly we cannot tell them to stop. If it is of recent this thing, not very serious condition, usually we tell them, okay, you can stop this. We are giving the medicine and it will take care of it. But then when the patients, they're completely dependent upon that thing. Many patients who have interstitial lung disease, like recently I had a patient, that lady is completely dependent upon steroids. Even if one dose is missed, and the whole this body will start getting swollen and she will start having difficulty in breathing. So in those cases we cannot say them to stop the medication immediately, but at least we can remove those medications which are not required from her this part of the medicinal routine, so that the body can have less to fight against. Because at the end the body has to fight against the disease. We are just helping the body, we are just helping the vital force with our medicines, but at the end the vital force has to fight against that part. So the more pressure is put on the vital force by these kind of medicinal diseases, those kind of things which are not needed. So with our interception we can basically do this thing is that decrease some medicines which are not required. So just we have to keep a note, make a note of what kind of medicine they have taken or have been taking, so that we can tell them how to uh, decrease the dose, or how they have to manage this thing. So the age of the patient, his mode of living and diet, his occupation, his domestic position, his social relations and so forth must next be taken into consideration. So next we have to take into consideration is the age of the patient, what kind of age is of the patient is, whether that is somehow hindering or favoring the disease process, his mode of living, how he lives, what kind of diet he's having, what kind of occupation he's having. For example, if a patient is basically working in a factory or working in a place where there is too much of dust, and he has to put on the mask all the time, so we have to consider that thing, that may be also a part or a small part of the causation which can be removed. We can tell them that with your conditions of this thing, don't do work there. His domestic position, how it is, how are his social relations, must next be taken into consideration in order to ascertain whether these things have tended to increase his malady. That something out of this For example, if someone is in a relationship which is harming him, some kind of friend, some kind of boyfriend, girlfriend, some kind of relative or some partner in the business where he has been taking a lot of hit. So we have to advise them accordingly. It is our duty as a physician to advise them that this thing is affecting you. Make some amendments about it, get out of it, or do something else, or how far they may favor or hinder the treatment, and how those things may favor or hinder the treatment, that also we have to assess, that what he should do which can help the treatment, or what he should stop out of all this thing. Some part of his occupation, some part of his diet, some part of how he has been living. Like the person is having a very sluggish routine, so we must advise him that go for some walk, you can go do some exercise, stretch yourself, so that it can favor that treatment. In like manner, the state of his disposition and mind must be attended to. So similarly, we have to also see what kind of state of mind he has been, whether he's anxious, whether he's sad, and what is making him anxious or sad or angry or depressed, how is he, or requires to be directed, encouraged, or modified. And we have to see also, assess also, whether his this mental state or disposition, rather we need to direct it or encourage it, whatever he is doing, or it should be directed to something else, or somehow we, if we can modify it. The pathological states of the mind, although it will come in the next aphorisms, that there are different kind of stages, and where we can intercept or interject it, or where we should not, everything will come in the coming aphorisms till aphorism 230, and we'll go through one by one. But there are some states of the mind or of the which have come as pathology. So there you cannot direct it. We have to understand this thing. For example, a patient who is suffering from autism, you cannot direct him or modify his behavior. He's not going to listen to you. On the contrary, we may aggravate the situation. The child, he or she will not, they will not listen to the advice, because they're in some pathological state, some disease state. But then there are something which is happening because of the circumstances around us. Like for example, today a couple came to our clinic. Me and Dr. Vidya, we were there, my wife, and this couple, they were telling about the symptoms or the things which they are going through, and their the personal thing about what was in their relation, that. So we gave them some advices, we gave them how they can, and when they were about to go, they were happy that okay, maybe this can help us in getting better as a person, also as a couple also. So when the circumstances are like that, then yes, your encouragement or this direction of the mind or the disposition, it will help. You encourage someone, you tell them that they can do this thing this way, it goes to the mind, they can take it and they can do as you have advised them to do. But not in a state of pathology. When we will be talking about the mental disease next, and I think maybe next week we will be talking about them. So there you will see that there no encouragement, no advice, nothing can help the patient. On the contrary, it will aggravate. So as a physician, that is also what we have to decide, that in which category this patient is. Whether the patient is basically suffering from a pure complete mental disease, a pathological mental disease, or just some emotional disease because of the circumstances, because of the part of the life which has been there. So after this is done, the physician should endeavor in repeated conversations with the patient to trace the picture of his disease as completely as possible according to the directions given above, in order to be able to elucidate the most striking and peculiar characteristic symptoms. So the physician He should go into repeated conversations with the patient, take a complete picture, depending upon the miasms, depending upon some kind of medicinal disease, all the steps which have been told us during the case taking. So we have to ask again and again about these things, make it more confirmed, make it more particular, so that we can find some characteristic symptoms. Like now, you all have been going through all these aphorisms in these lectures. You can see how many times Dr. Hahnemann has used this word characteristic symptom, because it is very important and it will keep coming on again and again, because all this thing which we are doing, going through whole the case, asking about the history, asking about some kind of diseases which the patient had, asking about what kind of medicines he have taken, this all is to find the characteristic symptoms. That is the goal, that is the aim, that is the motive, in accordance with which he selects the first antipsoric or other remedy. Because only this finding of the characteristic symptoms, it can help us in selecting which medicine we have to give, so that our medicine is symptomatically or homeopathic to the disease. Other remedy having the greatest symptomatic resemblance for the commencement of the treatment, and so forth. So aphorism 210, we will start from here, because from here the mental disease will start. The aphorisms on the mental diseases, how we have to understand them. From here they will start. So we will start it in next class. We will stop at 209 today. And again, just go through these aphorisms. I will also, although I have taken a lecture, if I don't know if it is present on YouTube, maybe if it is present, Dr. Rishabh, he will share that particular lecture with you in the group. But if it is not present on the YouTube, or if it is not present with us, then go through the chapter in Dr. Kent's philosophy. There are two chapters on Sura. I will also say that go with the psychosis and syphilis, but at least go with the Sura. What Dr. Kent there describes about Sura is a wonderful explanation. Dr. Henneman has given a wonderful explanation on the Sura, but that explanation has confused physicians, because the physicians did not join it, the understanding of that Sura, they didn't join it with the Organon. If you join both the things, if you keep both the things and try to understand, then you will have a very good understanding what Dr. Hahnemann wants to tell you. And that understanding is told by Dr. Kent when he tells about Sura, because he has joined both the things, the Organon and the chronic disease. When you see, look at both the things at a one single go, then you get a beautiful picture of what Dr. Hahnemann wants to tell us about Sura. But still, if before that, I will again tell you that go through that chapter of Sura. There are two chapters of Sura in Dr. Kent's philosophy. Okay, there is a question. I'll address to it later. So there are two chapters on Dr. Kent in Dr. Kent's philosophy on Sura. Go through them. Try to understand each and every word what Dr. Kent wants to tell, and you will have a very beautiful understanding of Sura, what it is. If we can get that lecture, if it is present on YouTube, we will put it there. But still, if you listen to the lecture, if we find the lecture and you listen to it, still go through those two chapters in Dr. Kent's philosophy. So Vishwangi asks, can long-term grief, disappointment, vexation cause chronic disease? There is nothing like a long-term grief or disappointment. Just look at your life. There are phases in the life when you are sad and you are happy. So we will not say that, for example, something happened at one particular time. With the passage of time, the emotion or the memory of that thing will decrease. It will never increase, first of all. For example, there was some sudden death in the family. With the passage of the time, yes, you will remember that person. You may cry sometimes, but the memory and the wound or the hurt, it decreases. That is the nature. That is the basic nature of everything which is universe. Okay, that nothing is steady. Even the pain is not steady. Even the grief is not steady. Even the disappointments are not steady. We move on. That is how we have been evolved. That is how we have been as an organism of this whole universe. So there is nothing like a long-term grief. Yes, things can add on to that grief, to that disappointment, to those vexations. Some new things can come up which can make it more bigger. But again, it will not be a long-term thing. There are phases when you are happy, there are phases when you are sad, there are phases when you are successful, there are phases when you are disappointed, there are phases when you are angry, there are phases when you are happy. So that is all ups and downs of the life. But if we see that grief or an event in the life can cause a long term effect on us, then no, it cannot. One event cannot. Many events they can, but then there will be different kind of effects which will again be temporary, or this part becomes a state of disposition which we'll talk about in next this thing. If the sadness becomes a state of disposition, then yes, that sadness that can cause or become a part of the chronic disease, not cause the chronic disease, but it becomes a part of that chronic disease. Causation is somewhere else. Causation is not here. All these things they happen because a patient is suffering from sora. The state of mind, if it is into some kind of grief, disappointment, vexation, some lack of confidence, a patient has gone into that state, continuous state, that is because of the sora which has already been happening. That is why I am saying you just go and read that chapter on sora, or listen to the lecture if we find it. Then we, if you still have any question about it, any doubt about it, we can again talk. But first go through that. But yes, to the question that no, it cannot, because there are no long-term griefs or disappointments or vexations. State of minds are there, which we call as dispositions. But then again, that is a part of the disease, not the causation of the disease. What is disease cannot be the cause. So cause is again sora, and we have to understand what is sora, how it basically develops in us, and how it starts affecting the physical body. So with that, I will take your leave. Just go through these aphorisms once again, and from next Wednesday we will start with the mental diseases, because next Wednesday we will have this lecture, but then next like week next to the next week we cannot be having, because I will be traveling at that time. So I think that next week we will try to do around 9 to 10 aphorisms, so that that one part of mental disease we can clear out, that what is the mental disease and how we have to proceed it, how we have to see it. So with that I will take your leave. Thank you.